just before you hit water, into the side of the well, he dug himself a cave. Okay? And when he came home at the end of the day, he would crawl down the well and he would sit in that cave that he dug for himself at the bottom of the well. And when it was time for dinner, one of the kids would have to go out and jiggle the rope to tell him it was time to crawl up out of the well and come up for dinner. Okay, that's a true story from my great-grandfather. They also told him a story about him, and I love this story, that during the Civil War, they required everyone to go off and fight. You know, Civil War was not a volunteer kind of war. It's kind of war whereby about halfway through the war, you either went or they came and got you and made you go. And so when he was 15 years old, they came and got him and put him in the army and sent him off to fight. And he was in the cavalry. And the cavalry got called out to go to the Battle of Mariana. And Mariana, most of you know, is a town about, 30, 40 miles south of us.
Yep.
And so the cavalry got to the Battle of Mariana, and they fought in the Battle of Mariana. And I remember as a kid, his portrait was on the wall. He was a very distinguished looking gentleman. He had a long white beard, as the men did in those days. And I remember asking my elderly uncle, well, what did he say about it? Because I was fascinated, with the story. And my uncle said, well, he told me he fired one shot and took off running. And, this is a shock to my system as a young boy, because we all envisioned our ancestor as a hero, And I said, but, why did he run? And he said, well, I asked him that. And I said, well, what did he say? He said, them people in Mariana ain't never done nothing for me. And so that probably tells you him in as good a terms as I could have said anything about him. But he used the art of dowsing to decide where to dig wells. And what they say about him is that the longer he dug wells, the better he got at dowsing and finding water. Now, this is true of all the old well diggers. The longer they did it, and the old dowsers, the better they got at it. Now, there's two ways to look at this. Either they became better dowsers, or they began to know where the water ran. Okay?
Yeah.
There's two ways to look at it. But this is what was handed down to me about how he did dowsing. And this is the story that came down from a well digger himself and a dowser himself. And you'll hear different stories about what types of sticks you had to use, all of this kind of stuff. And he never used the metal ones, which I've seen people use. He used the old wooden ones. And you'll hear people say you have to use witch hazel, you have to use willow. You'll hear people say you have to use peach to do your dowsing with. Peach is particularly good because in my family they also use peach to whip children with.
Whip children.
So
Baby
it
beaters.
serves a double purpose,
Baby
this
beaters.
is one that I made this morning. It's just, basically what my great-grandfather said is you could use any stick you found as long as it was a living stick, okay?
Living stick.
And the principle of it was that you sharpen the bottom end of it, and it had two branches like this. And you always used it palms up, because your palms are up because you are giving praise to God, and you're asking God to lead you to water,
Yes.
okay? And you would use it like this. You would have it at about a 45-degree angle, like that. And you would go out and you would begin to look for water. And you're asking God to direct you to pure water, okay? And what would happen, and you would have to have it very well balanced. And as you work, now it's obviously anywhere here we're going to look, we're going to find water right now, because what's been happening this summer, we've had nothing but rain. Plus we're about 100 yards from a creek, okay? So, but the way it would work is you would go out and it would begin to move and aim down at the point where you should dig your well, okay? And the theory behind it is that the water comes from the roots up into the branches of the tree, And that's why you have two branches and you're coming from a stalk of a young tree and you're coming up through the limbs and you're giving praise upwards and you're giving from the water up. You see how it works? Okay. Now, let me tell you a little bit about dowsing. There's been some scientific experimentation done on dowsing. And I find this kind of interesting because I was kind of curious about it. I'll tell you what he said about it. He said people like a show. Okay? So that was his attitude about it, was that people like to see him do that. It was what was expected of him. Okay? It's kind of like, when you have a chimney sweep come to your house, and they sweep the chimney, then they stand outside and they sing their little song, and you give them a tip, okay? That's what they expected of him as a well digger. So